Joining us now, maybe you could, if you're viewing, you can already see that we have somebody tapping her foot, saying, "Why am I sitting here?
Why have you made me wait so long?"
But if you're listening, then you don't know that Liz Bruenig is sitting there all mad. It's the great Liz Bruenig.
Yay.
Liz, you don't know it, but I love you. I love your podcast. It is my one must-listen podcast every week. If I can only get to one thing, I will get to Liz and Matt's podcast. And I call it Liz and Matt's because let's be honest, right?
Yeah. This is where the magic all happens. We're in the podcasting dungeon. Yeah.
So the great Liz Bruenig, you may know her, as Matt Bruenig's wife, but most people know Matt Bruenig as Liz Bruenig's husband. This is also, just to refresh everybody's memory, a long time ago I found some audio that was the Philadelphia 76ers
Locked On
podcast.
Yeah.
And it was the day before September 11th, and they were remembering September 11th.
They didn't forget.
And he was really talking about his memories and just what a sad time that was and all that kind of stuff. But as you may know also in the podcast world, sometimes live reads will happen.
Yeah.
And sometimes you kind of integrate it so it seems part of the show. And, once Liz and Matt listened to that same podcast on their podcast, and here's the audio.
I mean, the fact that you see kids, 20-something now, never even knew their family members. You know? It's tough. But let me tell you something that's not tough.
Okay.
Not tough at all. And I'm talking about direct TV streaming.
What?
Right?
What?
Don't cover your mic.
You got one device.
Oh, my God.
You sound like fake Norm. You know, I wouldn't pull this level of obscurity if it wasn't that high caliber.
What happened there? What on earth
He went
there?
into his live read of his sponsor, DirecTV Streaming.
Okay. All right. No, that's not reasonable. That's not something.
It's not reasonable. The funniest part to me about that is that they were playing that in a ticket promo during the time that your husband was defending us in a lawsuit against that company.
Well, her laugh. They used her laugh.
Yeah. I would just be in my car like, I don't know if you've put all this together or not, but, you know.
I like to use that as a transition when we're talking about something serious, and then
it's not tough.
I go, it's not tough. It's not tough at all.
It's not tough at all.
Move on to something else. Yeah.
So Liz doesn't belong with us.
No, not at all.
We don't feel comfortable with you, Liz, because you're like a real person who does real things that are important. We goof around generally. Liz was a writer for the New Republic, the Washington Post. Hey, we've been in there.
Compost.
The New York Times, and now writes for the Atlantic.
I don't have one for that.
In fact, Pulitzer Prize finalist for an article in the Washington Post, which I did not know about. I mean, I knew you were, but I had never read that until this morning. Funny. It's a funny article. Oh, no. I read the wrong thing.
It's not in a comedic vein.
No, not funny at all. It was actually just really depressing and sad. But I read that this morning, Liz. It was unbelievably great. So I think the Pulitzer guys, at least naming you a finalist, got it right. So if they needed my endorsement.
Thank you.
But probably should have gone with you for the overall thing.
You haven't read the others, though.
I did not read the others.
They may have been better.
To be fair.
Yeah.
That's true.
But we actually had you come on today. I actually have heard you talking. I think I heard you talking with Matt, a few months ago about, was it the same person who was recently executed by Alabama?
Kenny, yeah.
Who survived an attempted execution by lethal injection. And I've always thought, just to keep it a little light here to start at least, if you survive an attempted execution, shouldn't you then
You're
at least...
done. Yeah.
Okay, we'll keep you in prison for your life, but bravo. Somehow, whether it was our fault or that you're some kind of a superhuman...
You get to live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no. Yeah. They didn't do that. They just attempted a different way. But was that the one where Matt was staking out the entrance to see who was there and all that kind of stuff?
That was the execution of Jimmy Barber, where we actually found one of the executioners. And Matt was going to follow, based on other executions, we had kind of determined they were bringing in the executioners on an ambulance. To preserve their privacy and not have them use their personal vehicles or anything. So Matt was waiting outside the prison in an area they usually designate for protesters, watching the road to follow any ambulance that left, because that would take us right to where the executioners were. But he got hassled by the cops and had some funny hijinks with them. They're like, "Can we search your car?" And he's like, no, dog.
No way.
Yeah. Just and there was nothing in it. It was a rental car. There was nothing in there. But Matt, he's a lawyer and
he's Matt.
He's Matt, so he wasn't going to cooperate with the police and didn't. They talked to him for a few hours.
No, but that was so this is something that you have been doing for a while now, covering executions?
Yeah, since about 2020.
And in covering them, how I know you actually meet with the family, you get to know these people who are on death row, right? Can you tell everybody what actually goes into covering? What does that mean?
Well, so I like to, basically embed with the family of a person who's being executed, but there's a long buildup to that point, and it requires getting to know the person who has the execution date. Everybody in Alabama prisons are so bad that Trump's DOJ sued them for how completely out of control things are. And so everybody in Alabama prisons, even the guys on death row, they all have contraband cell phones. So you can just straight up text these guys. And so I just got to know a lot of them, either through their contraband cell phone usage, or in Jimmy Barber's case, just using the prison communication platform where you can email back and forth. I get to know them, and it takes a long time. They're all very different people. And then, I ask if I can meet their families, if I can talk to their families. And it's just really building relationships is a huge part of this work. And then when it comes time for the execution, I typically ask if I can serve as a personal witness, because the Alabama Department of Corrections won't let me serve as a media witness. In fact, they don't respond to my emails or calls at all. And if you serve as a personal witness for the guy, there's really not much they can do to keep you out, except this time where I got thrown out of prison and kicked off the witness list for smuggling in a pen.
Okay. More on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then
pen?
you go. Yeah. So, we were in the visitation room with Kenny, and these visitations the week of the execution are like 8 hours long. And so I didn't want to forget anything that was said. And so I was wearing kind of high boots when I came to the prison, and I just smuggled a pen and some paper in. They didn't pick it up on the metal detector. And I went in and started taking notes, and the warden happened to see a pen out, and he came in and was like, "Who's got the pen? Who's got the pen?" I didn't say anything. He's like, "Give me the pen, give me the pen." I wouldn't say anything. So he sent some officers in, and they pulled me out of the visitation room, took me to this bathroom, made me pull my shirt up, put their hands in my pants, and felt around, and then made me take my shoes off. And that's where they found my pen and my notes. And so they just kicked me out of the visitation. They just sort of put me outside the gate and closed the bars. And they kicked me off the witness list and said I couldn't witness because I'd smuggled in a pen.
Damn.
So,
Hardcore.
yeah, why can't you have a pen?
Well,
I
I mean,
have
it's a weapon.
no idea. Yeah, I mean, maybe they think the guy would use it as a weapon. Of course, when you're on death row, when you're on what they call death watch, that's the period leading up to the execution.
They
you're
don't
in
want you to kill
solitary.
yourself.
Yeah, they don't want you to kill yourself, but you're in solitary, so it couldn't be a weapon against anybody else. And yeah, I think they don't want journalists really covering what's
So they
going
don't.
on.
You're on death row. They're like, we're killing you,
Yes.
Yeah.
not us, not you.
Correct.
Because I would
Yes.
think that would solve a lot of problems. You wouldn't have to worry about the botched execution.
Yeah, and a lot of guys do commit suicide on death row because they, for a lot of reasons, but it's better to, do it yourself and let the state do it if you just completely hate them and don't want them to get one over on you. So it happens, yeah. Sorry to be such a bummer.
No, that's a weird just stance that the state
No, we're
takes,
going
I
to talk
guess.
about the Cowboys here in like 15 minutes. So
Yeah, we'll get your thoughts.
it's all good.
Yeah.
So what is specifically different about the way that they're doing this in Alabama now as opposed to the way that it's been done before?
Yeah. So, for a long time, since I guess, for the last 30, 40 odd years, lethal injection has been the most common method of execution in the United States. And Alabama last year or year before last had this series of 3 botched lethal injections. In the first case, the guy died, but it took 3.5 hours. They had pierced him with needles in his hands, feet, arms, everywhere they really could. And then they had cut into his arm looking for a vein they could identify just visually. So they just took some kind of sharp instrument and cut his arm open. It's called a venous cut down. And it's unclear if that's how they eventually succeeded in putting him to death. But I heard that there was this execution that had taken multiple hours and that the guy hadn't been conscious when the curtain went up. Usually when the curtain goes up, the guy has the opportunity to give his last words and to hear his death warrant read to him by the warden. This guy was unconscious. His name was Jonathan James. He was completely unconscious. I found that to be extremely strange just based on what I knew about executions. So I went to Alabama, asked his family if we could conduct a second autopsy because the state conducts one. And I went to the autopsy and I saw his body. And that's how we found out about the cut down, which they can't do by protocol. They're not allowed to do that. And all of the failed IV attempts. And I wrote a story on it. And then there was another guy, Alan Miller, who was up next to be executed. Jonathan James was executed in July. Alan Miller was up in September. I met Alan Miller. I met his legal team. I asked to witness, and he survived. Alan survived his lethal injection. And so next up was Kenny. Kenny was scheduled to be executed in November. I got to know Kenny really well, and I went to his execution, and he also survived. So Alabama just sort of stopped, like they slowly unlearned to do lethal injections. They just couldn't do it anymore for a period there. I don't know how that happened or why. I'm very curious about that myself. But they decided to really step on the gas with this other method of execution that's statutorily available but had never been tried in the world,
As it were.
which is called, nitrogen hypoxia. And that's where they put a gas mask on your face. They pipe in 100% pure nitrogen. It displaces all the oxygen in your body and drops the oxygen level of your blood to lethal levels. That's what they did to Kenny. And so no other state has tried that, though now that Alabama has figured it out, I suspect that they will.
Was there something in like the composition of the injections that changed?
They stopped being able to find veins. They just couldn't find veins. With Kinney and Allen, they pierced them all over, hands, feet. They tried to run a needle under Kinney's collarbone into this subclavian vein in the neck. They jammed a needle in there, but they didn't get a vein. They just got tissue. And so who knows why that is? Were they drunk? Was it a doctor who couldn't see very well? Were they unlicensed, out of practice? It could be anything.
Man, that's crazy. I don't know what to say.
I know. I'm sorry. I have the, when I'm like at a party or something and someone's like, what do you do for a living? I'm like, you ready for a huge bummer?
Yeah. You should just tell them about the cakes.
Yeah. I also bake and I have kids, and the other parts of my life are very happy.
Why did you start covering executions?
I guess kind of like my husband, I have a little bit of a defiant streak. And so I feel like if you're going to defend human life generally, you have to start where most people say that killing is justified, where, at least half of the people in the United States say killing is justified. You can't start with the people who are easiest to defend, because a lot of people already agree people who are innocent and have done nothing wrong deserve to live. That's already agreed. But people who are guilty, who have done things wrong, arguing that they deserve to live is a harder job, and it's more urgent because they don't have a lot of defenders. They don't have a lot of people who are willing to stand up for them.
So you're clearly anti-death penalty.
Yeah, at this point, I think I'm pretty strongly anti-death penalty, yeah.
Had you always been?
Well, I grew up in DFW, where everybody's like, yay, death penalty. My parents were pro death penalty. Not like they weren't like obsessed with it or anything, but like when executions would be on the news, they would be like, that's a good thing. I remember we were eating in like an Outback steakhouse when Tim McVeigh was executed, and everybody clapped.
Yeah, there are no rules.
Yeah, there's no rules there.
Thank you.
So you can do whatever. And I guess as a kid or as a young person, I just thought it was part of the normal run of things, that was a penalty. And if you did something bad, that was something that happened to you. But, the older I got and the deeper in my faith, the more I started to feel, we've all done things wrong. We're all people who make mistakes every day. And there are differences in degree that are very meaningful, but in terms of in kind, we're all sinners. And, in a certain Augustinian way of looking at things, every human being deserves death. And so it's either all of us get it or none of us get it. And I like the idea that none of us should get it.
Yeah, I always thought it was, it's weird because I'm an atheist, I suppose I would call myself, but I always just thought that this was rooted in your Catholicism, because that's like one of the few things that I love about Catholicism is that they're like, we're not doing that.
Yeah, a lot of it is. And
we're not wearing rubbers, right? That's another thing you
That's
love.
the other thing we're not doing. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're raw dogging.
Yeah. Yeah. A big part of it is the faith. And I get a lot of meaning out of that, but also I like the guys. I mean, you talk about non-judgmental, accepting people. It's going to be guys who have murder convictions every time. I think you watch movies and death row seems like a really violent and scary place, but it's actually not, because everybody's in solitary. And so it's not nearly as scary as Gen Pop, and the guys have typically been there a long time. They're older. Death row is like a nursing home. I think over half of people on death row in the United States have been there longer than 18 years. So they've had some time to think about things and come to terms with things. And usually, they're pretty cool.
A lot of reflection.
Yeah, a lot of thinking about mistakes and stuff like that. Frankly, something we could all do more of.
Well, as you wrote recently that's kind of like even being on death row is somewhat torture.
Yeah, it is. Living under, the impending knowledge of your certain death is a kind of torture. Mock executions are considered torture, I think, by the Geneva Conventions.
What does that mean?
mock executions, like when you take someone to a wall and you put a gun to their head and you pull the trigger, but there's no bullets in it or something.
Okay.
And you just do it to torture them or make them confess to stuff or whatever. But that is what happened to Kenny. He was put through a mock execution, you know. And so he's a guy who lived through a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. He was never really the same after his first execution. Yeah, it's pretty bad.
And of course, politicians often will say you have to have the death penalty because it's a deterrent. Is that actually the case?
No, I mean, places that have the death penalty don't have lower murder rates than places that don't have the death penalty. So, sometimes they have, higher rates of murder than places that don't have the death penalty. So I think the idea that it's a deterrent has been pretty firmly debunked. Even in places that do have the death penalty, whether or not to seek the death penalty is still mostly a matter of prosecutorial discretion. So you don't know, even if you commit a murder and you're thinking about the possible fallout, you don't know for a fact that they're even going to seek the death penalty. I mean, lots of people just take plea deals. Juries really like life without parole, LWOP, which is, pretty new actually as a penalty. I think Texas only got life without parole in the aughts, I want to say.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a relatively new. Not all places, got it at the same time, and but juries like it, right? Because it can be undone. And so there are a lot of reasons if you're committing a crime that you shouldn't automatically presume you're going to get the death penalty. And so I think that works against its use as a deterrent. Yeah.
I'm against the death penalty personally. I don't think they should have the death penalty, but it's funny to me.
Where's this going?
When they say, well, it's like, well, we're trying to find the most humane way.
Yeah.
To kill somebody. And so, yes, this the injection, that works great. Well, until it doesn't. Or, the firing squad seems to be a pretty secure way that you probably can't escape that one. We were talking yesterday, actually, promoting you. Why not the guillotine? It seems like that happens real quickly. Although the head will stay alive for 40 to 55 minutes.
Dan actually believes that.
Yeah, if the head rolling down.
Yeah.
The point is, to me, and I think it's always funny when I hear about war as well. Same thing. There are there's rule. They broke the Geneva Convention. Well, wait. War is I'm supposed to try and kill as many people as I can, but not this way. I'm also not pro-war. So by the same token, I just think, well, if there is no humane. If you just determine that killing someone is okay, well then, now what are we quibbling about? Just for your queasiness. And our discussion yesterday a little bit was, Jake, why don't they? Or if these things were public. Oh, I know why, because it was a Today in History note.
Yeah.
There was like a public hanging in 1911. And I thought, boy, that's pretty recent to have a public, government-sanctioned, in the square hanging. If that was the case now, we would eradicate the death penalty. And you argued with me. Like you said, that's...
Well, I only argued with you because I'm aware that for centuries that was like the most common popular form of entertainment, which is, I believe, true. Liz is a lot smarter than me, so she may have evidence to the contrary. but I it's my understanding that for a long time that's like what people did for fun.
Like, because now they seem to be hardcore trying to keep, like, they're trying to keep Liz out. They're trying to, like, any reason they have.
Yeah.
No, you can't view this publicly.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe sensibilities have changed, but I know for a long time, that part of society was very dark.
Yeah, public executions were a huge thing. I think the last one was in something crazy like 1936 in Owensboro, Kentucky. No, it's really not. It was a hanging.
Kentucky was the place I had it yesterday. Yeah, 1911.
Yeah, and they drew crowds of thousands these public executions. I mean, everybody from all around. People came into Owensboro, Kentucky, because there was a female warden who was supposed to be carrying out the execution. Everybody thought that was really salacious and
Well, that's hot.
interesting.
Hot, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But she ended up giving the job to a kind of male surrogate to do it for her. But after
Women, am I right?
Yeah. I mean, there was legislation. There were statutes considered about making executions something that happened inside prisons, as opposed to something that happened in public, because people didn't think they were, good for people. They didn't think it was necessarily a good thing for big crowds to get together and get all riled up about violence. And so it gradually became
The
this
UFC.
thing that happens, inside prisons and in secrecy.
It's weird that Kentucky is the last state. They seem so progressive.
Yeah, that is weird.
They've changed a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, how does this affect you?
Yeah, it seems like a pretty heavy load. Like, I just have to worry about whether or not they're going to fire McCarthy.
Yeah, and you like going to sleep at night.
Yeah.
Yeah, I in Catholicism, you can pray to the dead. They can't really do anything except pray for you. But I talked to Kenny and Jimmy, who were guys I really liked, who are dead, and asked them to pray for me to have wisdom and strength and compassion and courage to do all this. And, also the work makes me cry, but that doesn't mean it's not good work. I cried the whole plane ride home after Kenny was executed. I'm sitting on the plane, bawling, wiping my nose on my sleeve. People are looking at me. I'm like, I don't want to talk about it. And it was probably pretty uncomfortable for the two people on either side of me. But he was a friend. He was a friend of mine. It's like that Bob Dylan song, he was a friend. And it's really tough to see them go.
And what do you hope? Like, I would guess the aforementioned, the article I mentioned earlier that you got nominated for in the Washington Post, like, I would think your hope there is, hey, I need to bring this stuff to light so that it can change in the future. Is that kind of what some of your mindset is on writing about executions?
Yeah, if I can change, at least one or two minds about the humanity of the guys on death row, the possibility of change, the potential of forgiveness, if I can just make those things seem a little more real and a little more possible to like one or two people, I've accomplished my life's work. That's my small contribution to ending the death penalty.
Well, thoughts on Mike McCarthy staying with the Cowboys?
What do we do in the draft?
Yeah.
My dad's a huge Cowboys fan. And I can remember in the 90s, my mom telling my brother and I, Daddy's not mad at you. Daddy's mad at the Cowboys.
Boy.
It's okay.
My wife knows those words all too well.
So I have great love and affection for the Cowboys. Every year, somebody makes it their job to try to explain the rules of football to me, and I have aggressively declined to learn. I don't really understand, but it's good. It's
Stay
good
where
to have
you
on
are.
TV.
It's better to not know. Yeah.
It lends a certain mystique. Matt loves it. I love it because it means it's fall, and I love the holidays, and so I look forward to football season every year.
The only the thing I have to say about football and Catholicism is
interesting.
When my wife was Catholic as well, and she wanted to get married in the Catholic Church, so we had to have counseling before to teach us about how to be married. Because Catholic people, they never get divorced.
Yeah,
if they go through that. So we had the counseling, and it was the guy telling. There was a guy up there telling us, and he was like, "Look, ladies and guys, sometimes you have to let your ladies give them some time. They might like to go shopping."
Yeah.
And my wife was a bit taken aback by that, and then they said, "And the guys, you got ladies."
He might have to hit you.
Well, no,
Oh,
not
sorry.
that.
My bad. Sorry.
Give him his time to watch football on Sunday.
Okay.
Leave him alone on Sunday.
Yeah.
And so I will tell my wife, "Don't you remember the counselor? You want me to do this? It's Sunday."
And what was interesting about that is that guy had been married, right?
I don't believe so. No, he knew
that's
everything
weird.
about marriage, though.
Yeah, it's always funny listening to Catholic priests talk about women be like this. I'm like, how do you know?
Well, Liz,
But,
Thanks for your husband, and thank you.
and thank you for
thank you
being Liz.
much.
You guys are the best.
Yeah, go
I
check out
appreciate you
their
guys so much.
podcast. Go check out the New Republic.
No,
Excuse me, not the New Republic,
The
the
Atlantic.
Atlantic. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And check out the Bruenigs. Available on Patreon only.
Ooh.
Isn't that correct, Liz?
That's right.
Patreon.com?
Yep.
Fellow Patreon buddy.
Let's talk ketamine next time.
Oh, yeah, love ketamine.
Oh, this guy's
mean,
back
that's
here
a-
fist pumping.
Yeah, if you've got a drug, I'll do it. That's another big part of my job.
Okay, nice.
All right, thanks, man. We
Thanks,
appreciate
Liz.
you.
Thank you so much. It was nice meeting you guys.
Bye.
That's the great Liz
Bye.
Bruenig. Yay, indeed.
Yay, indeed. Yay, 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 yay.